Welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Romano. We are going to be talking about the correlation between the treasury market, the stock market, and the gold market, and our value of our currency and what is happening now. I will also provide information on how you could take advantage of this rebalancing. As you know, interest rates are going through the roof and housing prices are finally coming down. Before we continue the video, please remember to do thumbs up. It's right there, just press the button. Thank you so much. Because interest rates are going up, it's not just because of inflation, and I keep saying this in multiple videos, okay? What's happening now is, as I also mentioned, globalization is coming to an end. And how does that play a role in the global economics, okay? China and other countries have taken over a lot of our manufacturing, and that was created because of our government creating deals with these countries. In other words, we'll let you make our products, but you have to do what we want. So since the Bill Clinton era, that's what's been happening. But now that type of negotiations are changing. Our federal government is so resilient, it's beyond our capability. It's not the senators and the political parties and all these people that you know actually manage our government. It's the people that work for the government as an employee. The senators and the politicians, they simply follow what those employees tell them. So if globalization is coming to an end, which it is, and the reason why that's going to come to an end very fast is because at a certain point, the cost of having that product made in another country and importing it back to our country is not going to make sense. And right now, that tipping of the scale is happening. It actually is cheaper to have the products made here. So right now, a lot of the wealth is no longer going to those countries that were once a manufacturing hub. Two, in America and our economics, it's tipped the scale to the right, meaning that now we can no longer allow that to happen because the federal government is not bringing enough tax dollars in enough revenue to pay their bills, and they haven't. And this is why they've been borrowing money, and this plays a role in the treasury market, okay? So since Bill Clinton era, he negotiated that trade deal. It doesn't matter what country he did that with. But if you want to go back, it was actually Richard Nixon that started that. But that was because something changed. How do you know what changes? Every 30 years, there's a different negotiation that the federal government uses. During World War II, the negotiation was, we will lend you money, but you have to buy our products. And that's what they did with other countries. But then once the war was over, and over a decade later, once the European countries, they were well capitalized and things were rebuilt, and in 20 years later, they had a good economy again, and they started to make products. You've seen the manufacturing sector in America start to slow down in the 60s. And then by the 70s, it was apparent that it was no longer, you've seen people get laid off, companies go bankrupt, and by the early 80s, that was really apparent. So the negotiations, once again, changed from, we'll lend you money, but you have to buy our products. Then Richard Nixon came in, and that all changed. So when he came in, there was another change that happened. You couldn't have the dollar pegged by gold because they had to keep printing money and creating the money supply. And with the gold reserves back then, there was only a certain amount of gold available, okay? Now, of course, today, we have a different type of system that mines for gold. Literally, they could take a whole mountain apart. But then by the 70s, the equipment and the technology became cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So they were worried that the gold prices were not going to be what it was and that there was going to be too much gold. That's why, again, gold prices changed and you had the public allowed to have gold bullion. But when the period you had the government pegging the dollar with gold, the public was not allowed to have gold bullion. They were only allowed to have the currency, and that's a gold coin, silver coins, etc. That deal with Richard Nixon and the government was temporarily. It wasn't supposed to be for so long. And because of the Cold War era, things started to get really rocky. They had to keep spending money. So you have to print money, but if you're going to print money, you need more gold. Exactly, so they had to stop that peg. So then you had the interest rates go through the roof because of that. And so a country that has high interest rates, they're able to sell their treasuries for a good amount. And other countries will actually buy them. Now you have to remember, a treasury is a fixed asset. It's guaranteed. Of course, our country is guaranteed because our country and the leaders of our country always agreed that they would always pay the debt and they would never let bankruptcy happen in the government because all they had to do was continue to print money. But the more money you print, the value of the dollar goes down on a global scale. We're not in an era where we're going to be the manufacturing hub for the world right now. It may change. So you have to change that situation. But right now, the interest rates again are going through the roof, and it has nothing to do with inflation. It has nothing to do with food costs. Food costs are high because the farmers in America are creating ethanol instead of growing broccoli. As an investor, you have to think about how you could take advantage of all these changes. Well, all you need is a local greenhouse, do aquaponics, and start growing vegetables in the local village or the town that you are in and sell it to those markets. You'll make money. Two, how do you take advantage of a situation where the real estate market now has to go down? You're going to have less competition in the markets, not because of low inventory. Low inventory happened because you had foreign investors pouring billions, trillions of dollars in the American market. They weren't just buying buildings in Manhattan. They were going through all of America and buying single-family houses as well. And so the typical person that wanted to buy a house for the first time, they had a lot of competition from all these people from the Asian countries. That is coming to an end, and it's going to happen very abruptly. That's why the government is also increasing interest rates so that it looks as if, oh, it's because of interest rates. It's not because of interest rates. Because when you have less competition, the price is going to go down anyway. Now, what is also happening, since Bill Clinton, the government's had the lowest gold reserves possible. And gold was very cheap because you had a lot of governments selling their gold reserves because they didn't need it to back it by their currency because their currency was no longer pegged by that currency. It was an agreement that we will pay our deficit and the bills of the Treasury with the agreement that you will have the full faith of the US government and the power as a superpower. So it also played a role as a superpower, making sure that the US government would never go bankrupt or not be able to pay their debt. There's a professor that goes over the story very, very carefully. Everything he said is 100% accurate. I'm a doctor of finance and I understand finance very well, particularly financial management and leadership. And what he talks about is all the government has to do is print more money. But as you know, it affects the value and what we could buy. So again, the government, the more money they print to pay off that debt. And what's happening now is you have the Asian countries. Japan owns more treasuries than China. So Japan is also in a very bad situation economically, but China is even more in a worse position than ever. Because you have to remember, Japan's wealth creation, the peak of their economy was in the 1980s, okay, 70s and 80s, when they took over a lot of manufacturing from America. Our TVs were no longer made in America. They put those companies out of business and they were made in Japan. They took over a lot of electronics as well. So they had 30 years to reduce their manufacturing exports to America. If the American economy slows down like it did back then, you remember Japan, they had a big economic slowdown. So right now, you have America having an economic slowdown. It's not really a slowdown, it's a change on how we do business as Americans. So the building sector could only go up so much, okay? And then it collapsed in 2008, that was all a plan. And then they lowered interest rates even more to allow it to go up again. That cycle is now at the end. You have to manufacture a good in America. So you can make a spatula, whatever it is that's cheap, that's simple, that requires 1 or 2 steps is what you have to focus on. So all those people that were in the real estate sector, that's going to decrease and they will have to move into the manufacturing sector. This young generation, all you young kids out there, you really don't like to be told what to do. Now you should be focusing on being an entrepreneur and don't waste your time working for someone else. Because back then, people were very vicious on how they spoke. Today, you don't need to work for someone else. You could start making a product yourself. You could open a business yourself. You have to understand that right now, there's a huge change that's happening because of the dollar and the global economy, as the dollar being the top of the currency. That agreement still exists. So the US government is not going to let those Asian countries play around with that. And so that's why interest rates have to go through the roof again to make our currency the highest. But again, what do? You have to print more money to pay the deficit. Those treasuries, they have to pay the interest on that. And so the more money that they make and they print, the more the value of the American dollar does go down. Thank you so much for watching my channel. Please remember to subscribe to my channel. Do thumbs up to say thank you, Anthony. It's right there. Just press the button. I want to thank you so much.